Hey friends, recently I recorded 2 videos on this really cool microtonal guitar by Sala Music with this fretboard where you can move each individual fret on each individual string to make it perfectly in tune. And the 2 videos I made did surprisingly well. There's tons of comments. Also, there's sort of a comment war going on, and people debating, people saying this is a cheap gimmick, people saying this is the most beautiful guitar they've ever heard, and everything in between. So I thought I would take a moment to respond to some of your questions, debunk some myths I heard in the comments, and also talk about the concept a little more in depth. The first thing I should say is that I forgot to credit the inventor of this really cool fretboard design. He's linked in the comments. His name is Toglahan. He has this great YouTube channel full of really cool microtonal playing, so please do check him out. And also, if you want one of these, there's a link in the description where you can buy your own. Okay, now let's react to some comments. The first thing I saw was that, I was playing this piece, this famous prelude by Bach, originally for cello, and I got this comment that said, "This is crazy, because this is like the exact opposite of what Bach generally went after, equal temperament." This is a really common misconception, actually. Equal temperament, if you don't know, is the modern tuning system of dividing the 12 notes of an octave, E to E for example, dividing them with 12 equal half steps, semitones. And modern guitars are all tuned to equal temperament. Bach did not use equal temperament. Bach is a product of the Baroque period. In the Renaissance and the Baroque period, they were all playing in temperaments, which is what this is. This weird little tuning system I have going on here is a temperament. Keyboards use them, like harpsichord and organ. Harps use them because you could tune every string. Lutes in guitars used them because you had movable gut frets. So here's one of my lutes, and you can see that the frets are tied around the back here. Just like the strings, they're the same material, gut, sheep intestine. That's the historical string. They're tied around, and because they're tied around, I can move any fret that I want, wherever I want, which means I can customize the temperament, the tuning system. So this idea is actually very old. Bach famously wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, which are 24 beautiful pieces with one temperament that works for all of them. It's not an equal temperament, and although the temperament can play in all the keys, each key doesn't sound the same. Some sound better, some sound worse. This is how temperaments work. It wasn't until much later that equal temperament became standardized. So actually what I was doing in this video with a microtonal guitar tuned in a temperament, this is actually more in the spirit of what Bach would have done. Other comments pointed out that because the frets seemed so awkwardly and randomly spaced, how could you even play a bar chord? Well, you can, because they still are in enough of alignments that you can do it. Right? The only difference is that your fingers have to do a little bit of wiggling to get used to these kind of bizarre fret spacings. The weirdest one is E major, because suddenly you see the G sharp here. This is the 3rd string, 1st fret, is quite low. It's not in line with all these other frets. Suddenly you have to jump back. So my index finger has to go farther to the left to get that nice, beautiful, pure E to G sharp. Another frequent comment I got was, okay, this sounds pretty good, but you can only play in one key, so this idea is stupid. And one thing I've learned through studying ancient music and reading treatises from the early Baroque period and the Renaissance is that people weren't stupid. They were very smart. They had the same mental capacity that we do, and they played using these temperaments, and they wrote some of the most sophisticated, beautiful music of all time. And they definitely didn't play in one key only. So this is much more sophisticated than I think many of you assumed intuitively. So yes, I can play in D major. Or D minor. I can play in G major. Or G minor. Let's see, I could play in C major. Or I can play in F major. A minor, or A major. So you can see it actually works in a whole set of keys, usually keys which are close together on the circle of fifths. And then if I wanted to have a new set of keys, say for example, keys that have a lot of flats or sharps, then I can rearrange my frets and have access to a whole new set of keys. And by the way, rearranging frets takes a few minutes. One comment I got, which bothered me a lot, was the idea that this is a cheap gimmick. This idea, as you've been seeing in this video so far, is not something new. It's not something that works just for one little trick. It's something that was used for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? From the medieval period all the way to the Baroque period, for many, many hundreds of years. And by some of the most genius composers. You have composers like Monteverdi, who wrote full 3-hour-long operas in this temperament, quarter comma mean tone. And he plays in many, many keys and many different affects and feelings and styles. So the idea that this is limited to one key is a little silly. Now, a number of you noticed that this idea bears some resemblance to this new popular trend of using true temperament guitars. If you haven't seen true temperament guitars, it's basically the same concept as this, except the frets aren't movable. So the fretboard is designed with squiggly frets, which are pre-arranged in one specific temperament. And while yes, normal guitars are already in equal temperament with fixed, straight frets, the makers of these true temperament guitars claim that this is more accurately in equal temperament. So that's a very cool thing, and I think this is actually much cooler because with this system, you can tune to many temperaments. There are more temperaments than I've ever heard of. I mean, I've heard of at least 30 temperaments, and there are many more because it's just a system of compromising notes up and down to get different sounds. And you can do any type of gradient you want between two notes. So the spectrum is sort of infinite. Another misconception I found is that some people were a little upset that I was saying I was playing in a microtonal way, Bach using a microtonal system. They said, no, this isn't microtones, you're just playing in a temperament. Well, I would greatly encourage you to watch my video all about temperaments. It's in the description, and I break down the whole concept there. I don't want to rehash all of that here, but essentially it's both, right? So the idea of temperaments are that in between our fixed 12-note system that we use today, if you have notes that are in between those notes, the unequal notes, those are microtones. And as you can clearly see here, I have a lot of notes positioned in between where notes normally go, and you could call these microtones. But the actual system that makes this make sense, the actual pattern you see, is called a temperament. That's the tuning system. I think why people are getting confused here is because often in many wonderful Eastern styles of music, Turkish music, Arabic music, they make really great use of notes like halfway in between. They'll use the 3rd fret and the 4th fret, but they'll also use a note exactly halfway in between. They call them like half sharps and half flats. This is such a cool thing, and they divide their octave in many, many notes, not just 12, sometimes more than 20. I would greatly encourage you to listen to some wonderful oud players or saz players who do this. I find it so expressive, so beautiful, and also challenging for my ear, which is great. So no, I'm not doing that, but the inventor of this specific fretboard system, Tolgahan, does a lot of that Eastern music super well, and you can hear him making great uses of slides and microtones, and that would be where you could hear that being used to really, really great effect. So in general, when I was scrolling through these comments, I just noticed there's a lot of confusion going on around temperaments and tunings. People have heard some maybe strange things that aren't exactly true, so I just wanted to fix them when I see them. Another thing I hear sometimes is this one: the piano is also, of necessity, an equal temperament instrument. It's not actually. Keyboard instruments can be tuned each key, right? So each key is individually tuned, meaning it can go up or down wherever you want it to be, which means you can play in any temperament. In fact, there were even organs in the Baroque period that had split keys, so you could have a lower or higher version of specific notes. Now, inevitably, when we make a video about tuning systems, someone's going to chime in with a conspiracy theory about 432 hertz. So this person is mentioning this idea that the Rockefellers enforced 440 hertz, and there's all the other ideas that it was the Nazis. Verdi composed at 432, and he was right, and this vibrates with the natural state of the earth or something. None of this is true, I have to point out. A lot of people like the idea. I know it sounds cool. Moving pitch up and down is totally cool. and you can move the entire pitch center up and down. And people did this in early music. I often tune my guitars higher or lower, and it's a very cool concept. And 432 is cool. If you want to play in 432, it's a little lower, a little darker, but the ideas about Nazis and enforced pitch, and was used as a sort of oppression, and there's something magical about 432. I've heard it enough where we have to sort of stamp out this idea. Now, on the other side of the fence, we have people who do know about these cool historical tunings, and then they say things like, equal temperament is modernity's biggest scam. In fact, there's this really fantastic book by Ross Duffin called How Equal Temperament Ruined Western Music, or something like that. I strongly encourage you to read it. But this is also a little hyperbolic because equal temperament exists for a very good reason, and that's if you want to play in every single key, all 24 keys, and have them all sound the same, it does the job perfectly, right? It's super practical, super easy to play in. You don't have to think about which key you're in and which key is going to work with what tuning. They all work. So it's pragmatic, it's standardized, it's really a cool idea, but the fact that we can also play in temperaments and have chords which are more in tune, beautiful thirds, that's also a really cool idea. So it just depends on what you're going for. Several people asked me to bend notes. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work super well because you can see each individual fret has their own sort of groove, and so I'm going to run into in between each fret when I try to bend. So bends won't work on this guitar. However, this guitar comes with this little kit of all these extra little frets. And inside of here, you have some very long bars. And so I can replace frets with bars, and then I can do some sliding. So this is really cool, and Togahan does this in a bunch of his videos. So please, again, watch him. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something new. My goal here is really to educate. I don't want to make anyone feel bad by pointing out something they said is wrong. We're all learning. I'm saying things that are wrong, I'm sure, occasionally, and then we learn and we go, oh, okay, now I know that. So I'm just trying to be helpful here. And things like this are really cool for us musicians because they challenge us musically. They challenge our concepts of how notes work in the first place, of how chords should sound. What do we call in tune exactly? Why is it in tune? Could it be more in tune? And then discovering that these ideas are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and that guitarists and lutenists from the past always knew that you could move notes up and down and move their frets. This is such a cool thing to me, and I find it fascinating. I hope you do too. Please do subscribe for more videos. I have lots of videos, historical instruments and how they work, talking about gut strings, playing with or without nails. If you're trying to learn classical guitar, you can also check out one of my many courses at classicalguitar-pro.com, or sign up for private lessons with one of my expert teachers at my online music school, Arpeggiato. All right, friends, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.